but one of my students had an out-of-body experience this morning. So I'll read directly the message that he sent me, but I won't share his name. So he said, "Hi Jade, hope you're keeping well. Just like to say thank you. It may sound crazy, but you helped me have an OBE this morning. You were in my dream, a non-lucid dream, and you were a guide of sorts. You gave me instructions in the dream to have an out-of-body experience, which I followed. So I closed my eyes and felt as if I was curled up in the fetal position. I slowly rotated in many directions." It's very similar to the rollout and the spinning technique, the exit techniques, for those that may know about them. And I separated from my physical body. It was hard to navigate, and I floated through the ceiling. I was all over the place, like a newbie, a beginner with the L plates. A hand reached through the ceiling and grabbed mine. It pulled me through into a room with a desk and lots of windows. It was a simple office with an old oak carved desk. A lady was sat there. She knew I was coming and she greeted me. Annoyingly, my alarm clock went off and I was back in my body. Bizarre experience, he sent me. So I sent him a reply going, "What? You had an out-of-body experience, yay!" So it was really nice to have that message from him. And he did the shifting, the movement technique, which often is this felt sense. We draw in our memory of a felt sense motion, hence the rocking technique some people here will be familiar with, or the spinning corkscrew technique as well. It seems he did that within the dream, and then it sounded like the dream dissolved, or he shifted away, and then he came out of his body and found himself in his room floating up out of the ceiling. So often I get asked so many times, you know, what is the difference between a lucid dream and an out-of-body experience, and how do you know if you're in one or the other? So this is quite a good example of how we might shift from one to the other, although it's not exactly the same for every person. But just to answer that question, I put forward myself because I'm sure somebody will be thinking it. So the difference between lucid dreaming and astral projection largely does depend on the view, the lens in which we're looking through. Are we looking through the Western scientific lens, a shamanic tradition, Tibetan Buddhist lens? It depends on that through how we make sense of it. However, if I take the Western psychology point of view, the phenomenology, so the way we experience lucid dreaming and out-of-body experiences, is somewhat different. There are varying different things with the experience of the body, the sense in space. For example, in a lucid dream, you usually have the same body as you do in normal life, not always, but most of the time. Feels physically real like this. You can touch yourself, you can put your hand on your heartbeat. But in a OBE, an out-of-body experience, usually we don't have a body at all that's in a physical form. It might be an energy body, it's called a light body, or a subtle body, kind of like we're a ghostly apparition. So you don't have anything you can hold and touch. So that would be an example of one sign. My personal opinion, and this is obviously from my experience and some of the training that I've done, I see the lucid dream as though we're in the computer of our own mind. We have access to the hard drive, the files, and the pictures, whereas a out-of-body experience seems like we go through the cable into the internet. So we seem to have access to different sites, different places, and different people. So we go beyond the boundary of our own mindscape and tap into other non-physical dimensions or realms around us. But I won't say around us, because that's making an assumption that there's a separation. So I'm getting a little bit philosophical here, to be honest. But just to keep it simple, it does seem to be that there is a boundary, a malleable space in which we can cross over or weave through, where we seem to go beyond our own mind. Obviously, we take our mind with us. So this brings into question how much of the lucid dream is our own mind, and how much is the out-of-body experience something separate? Or are they different states accessing with the availability to access more of our mind in a lucid dream or more of other places in an out-of-body experience. If you want to test it, you can in an OBE, you can go find a door number or a car number, go visit your friends, see what they're doing, come back to the body and then verify it. In a lucid dream, you can't normally do that because the whole scene and environment is created by your own mind. But in a very simplistic way, just on how it's defined, an out-of-body experience is the sense of shifting or moving out of the body, usually floating or sinking out, whereas a lucid dream, a dreamer will typically accept that they're dreaming. They'll go, oh my God, I'm in my dream. Whereas an out-of-body experience, the most commonly reported phrase is, it felt realer than real. And they usually believe that they went somewhere external to their own mind.
That's so interesting. And just so we get a sense of what people in this audience already are familiar with and what they know. First of all, if we use a phrase you're unfamiliar with, like, okay, lucid dreaming, what does that even mean? Or we use some kind of, then just pop that question in the chat. If for whatever reason you kind of want to keep that anonymous, you can private message me that question. I will read it out without your name. But more generally, I'd be interested if anyone if you've had an out-of-body experience, either spontaneously or induced deliberately, feel free to put that in the chat as well. Again, privately or to everyone, just so we get a sense of like, okay, you're out of your bodies right now, even as we're doing the recording. It's kind of like for breakfast, or you're kind of curious and it's not something you've done before, but you're interested to find out. Yeah, it would just be great to hear from some of you in the chat to get a sense of what experience in this you've already got. I'd be interested, Jade, whilst people are doing that. So you mentioned there's the Western psychology perspective. Are you familiar with like how the Tibetans would view this as an example, or how another culture would, is it very different, how they perceive the difference between lucid dreaming and astral projection, this kind of thing?
Yeah, so within Tibetan Buddhism, it's not dissimilar to what I said. In fact, Lama Yeshe Rinpoche, who I received some guidance from for astral projection, says astral projection is like a bird's nest. So the nest is your body and the bird is your consciousness, which can move around and move out. So they would say that lucid dream, you're flying and doing all sorts of stuff within your own mind, whereas the out-of-body experience, you're accessing external dimensions. Obviously, I'm saying external again. It depends what your view of the nature of reality is. I mean, within Tibetan Buddhism, they perceive this world here and now as dreamlike, as empty, in which science does as well. Everything is 99.999999 13 times 9 empty space. So again, it's varying degrees of realness, if you like, but it depends again how you define real. But I always get a bit too philosophical, so I might go quite far out. I always need to rein myself back in to keep it simple. So the Tibetan Buddhists practice it for 3 reasons mainly, and they're usually masters. So this is not taught it's not taught flippantly. It's actually considered quite serious. It's considered an advanced superpower, a siddhi in most of the yogic traditions. And you're taught it very briefly at the end of a 4-year retreat, but even then it's just touched on. And they practice it to die consciously. So at the moment of death, they consider it to be the last opportunity, if you like, for enlightenment, and to be conscious as you pass over into what they call the bardo state, which is where they believe you go between this life and the next. So you can be aware, and then you can choose where your next reincarnation is. If you are conscious in the bardo, effectively you're astral projecting. If you're not awake and aware and conscious, then they say, the winds of karma pull you to your next body, your next soul's contract, if you like. But the other 2 reasons are very practical. So they want to go to a teaching on the other side of the Himalayan mountains, and they can't get there. So they go into a deep altered state, and then they go attend the teachings, come back, and then they've been able to do that. So very practical, similar in some
Buddhist Zoom, Buddhist internet.
It's the Buddhist internet. They just fly out, they go check it out, and they come back, and it's not even considered anything generally mystical. With some of the monks do it. It's quite practical. And it's the same within some shamanic traditions. The shaman would have the out-of-body experience, go see where the herds have gone so they can come back and tell the hunters where the deer are or where the buffalo herds have moved on to, so they can go and get food for the village. So it's very practical. And this is somewhat different. The experience is different to remote viewing as well, and having visions, for example. So they're not quite the same experience, which are also harnessed in these different traditions. But it's generally known in Western psychology as polyphasic perception. So in the West, we don't have this anymore. We don't have this connection to polyphasic perception, different ways of seeing and different ways of knowing. We generally go, if I can see and I can feel it, then it's real and it's true. Whereas in other traditions, they have varying different ways of getting into access deeper truths effectively, and then they act on that and make decisions on that within their communities as though that is something that is real and true. And this is what I think is beautiful about the out-of-body experience, because we can effectively do the same thing, and people have and made quite big decisions about their life based on what the gnosis, which means inner knowing, the strong truth that they felt within their OBE, that they haven't had to have evidence for, because they've just known it to be a truth. Not dissimilar to when people come back from a near-death experience and have a profound opening or awakening, and then make kind of rash or radical decisions. One of the, I don't know why I find this quite funny, it's probably not funny at all, but so one of the things when people come back from a near-death experience is the divorce rate goes up. So many people actually divorce their partners for various reasons, as well. And Dr. Penny Satori writes about this in her book, The Wisdom of Near-Death Experience. And she's got another book called The Transformation of Near-Death Experience, because of the profound gnosis. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Amir, but also I think the founder of Extinction Rebellion, she didn't have an OBE, but she did have an ayahuasca journey where she felt like, I think there was some sort of death experience there. And she came back, and I think she divorced her partner as well and went to do this big mission that she felt called to do. If that's right, you probably know more about that than me, I imagine.
So if you want a divorce, but you're too scared to ask for it, you send your partner to an ayahuasca ceremony or an OBE course.
Oh no, I should really be focusing on the other things rather than talking about these crazy side effects that may happen. Don't worry, you probably won't divorce your partner.
Well, I just want to say as well, we did a panel about a year and a half ago, just before COVID. So again, if anyone's listening and you're kind of like, this sounds totally mad, I just kind of tuned in, but these people, just the fact that they're taking this seriously at all makes them sound like complete insane people that I can't take seriously. We did a very interesting panel a year and a half ago, so I'm not going to go into that in this conversation, I think, just because it was covered quite comprehensively, and we're releasing that on YouTube in the next few days. So if you're interested in the debate between scientists and academics and people that have been studying this about, is this actually a real phenomena beyond the subjective experience? Are people actually traveling anywhere? Are they really experiencing anything beyond the limits of their normal perception? Then that's a whole different conversation, which we'll share on the SciSoc YouTube channel very soon. But I just want to circle around to personal experiences. So putting aside, okay, is this true, is it not? You mentioned a couple of weeks ago you had quite an interesting, I don't know if it was related to time travel or that's a separate conversation, but you had a personal experience a couple of weeks ago that I thought you could share.
Travel out of body experience, which that I've
just repeat that for me. You froze at just last sentence. If you just repeat that.
Am I back? Can you hear me? Am I still frozen in time? You can hear me.
Yeah, still time travel.
Which is relevant because we were talking about time travel. So yeah, there was a time travel experience that I had. I mean, this isn't one of the recent ones, but I was actually on an out-of-body experience retreat in France with a teacher called Todd Akamesis. And I came out of my body into the room, and sometimes, and I've mentioned this in my courses, sometimes you can't see, and you come out because you have the exit. The way I exited on this occasion was I was lying in bed and I arched my energy or astral body out, tipped my head back, and then I snaked out of my head and then used the belief of gravity. So obviously gravity doesn't exist in non-physical realms. It's just our expectation of gravity. So knowing that, I used the expectation of falling out of bed to help pull the rest of my energy body out. So I slid out like a snake coming out of its skin, landed on the floor. I knew I was in the room, but the room was really black. So I yelled out, "Clarity now." And the sort of the lights lifted, or my awareness got clearer. And then I said, "Make it clearer." And then it came sharp into view like Spider-Man senses. And then I flew around and I heard this. I was in the room and I heard this singing, and it was kind of like old fable singing. And I heard it was like three guys, you know, when they sing in Scotland, they sing those old tunes, an island that are wonderful with their communities. So it was someone singing, and I looked out the window and there were three people sat on the ledge outside, and they were in army gear, and they had like pints, and they were sort of singing away, and I don't know what they were singing, but it was something like this, and it was very kind of vibe. And I just looked at them through the window, and I was just watching and observing, which is what I do. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. Somehow I'd shifted out, or it seemed to be, I'd shifted out into the same building, the same room, but I was in a different time period, which I'm assuming was when the war was, or one of the wars, I think probably the Second World War. And so I didn't want to scare them, so I just moved away, and then I flew through the wall out the other side, and it was nighttime. I saw the moon, all very crystal clear, crisp, like this reality, but clearer, which is such a statement that people say. They always say it was like this, but realer than real. And I was flying through the sky about the rooftop level, and there was a dog on the floor that saw me and started chasing me on the floor and barking up at me. So this was the first time I'd had an animal sense my presence in another altered state, and it freaked me out. I was like, oh my God, the dog can see me. And there were two, and another one joined, and then they were running along the floor as I was flying. I was like, ah, and then I got two. I didn't get scared, but I was just so shocked that something could see me, because I'm so used to not being seen, and I'm used to observing others, that I came straight back to my body. Too emotional, the usual thing. If you get too excited, too scared, too overwhelmed, you often come back to your body. And that was interesting for me. So I found out that what are they called? Sorry, I'm not catching my words today. People in the army were based there in World War II, in this part of France, and they would stay there, which was interesting. I didn't know that previously. So talking about, Amir, you know, are these experiences real or unreal, or can we prove them? I'm interested in what goes against your belief system. So if you didn't know of something, you didn't believe something, it's not part of your culture, why would you be experiencing something like that? How would you know about it? And the reason this is interesting is because in neuroscience, we perceive what to be there based on our expectations and predictions. So if we think we're going to see a demon, we think we're going to see an angel, we probably will have access to that experience on some level because it's within the frame of our perception. But if we're not aware of something and then we have an experience of it, such as maybe an atheist having an experience of God, or an awakening, or something outside of your own culture, that's really fascinating, because that goes against what current neuroscience says. So how much of this experiences are we making up in our mind, if any, versus is it really there and we're going somewhere that is true?
And I'm going to start reading some of the questions from the comments very soon, but just before I do that, how common are time travel experiences in the kind of out of astral projection community, let's say, and what significance are they given, if any? Is it like, okay, you should really research this period if you've been there somehow, or
yeah,
you know, you're going to find out if that was one of your ancestors or something like this?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Amir. So some people associate their time travel experience with past lives. So some people feel a strong resonance that they've been here before, something significant happened there, or they had a strong relationship with a friend, family, or a lover in that place, and that's why they've been pulled there and are maybe re-experiencing something, or being pulled there to what they feel is gain a lesson or an insight about that, which then can aid them in their everyday life here and now. So some people have a strong sense of that. But here's the tricky thing. You can go to a place and have a full time travel sense of it, like I did. Everything was how it was like in 1945. Hope my history is good here. In the war, the Second World War. But you can have overlapping layers of perception. So you could come out of your body, and I'll describe an experience I've had, go into the street. Everything in the street seems to be as normal. Cars, people walking, you get a strong sense of this is happening now. I'm on the earth plane, or the physical plane is what we call it. But then the buildings were 18th century. So I was perceiving parts of the space in the here and now, but then the shape of some things, the look of the buildings were 18th century. And I knew that I was seeing kind of two overlapping realities. So you have to be open in your mind to allow for anything to unfold. And I've had a similar thing where I've seen people walking around in a park. I've been in a park, seen people in the park in daytime. Not all my experiences are at night. And then I've seen what someone might suggest to be a being or a spirit or some sort of entity in the park that I've then gone over to and had an exchange with, whilst other people in ordinary reality are seeming to be walking around. So, you know, is that a thought form from my own head, or was that something external in that same space, but on a different dimensional level, which, you know, we can go into all sorts of quantum physics and layers of consciousness with that conversation.
And just one last personal question. So you've had lots of these kind of experiences. They sound totally out of this world to me, like beyond what I've seen even in quite far out science fiction type films. So I'm curious, does that change how you, it's quite a mundane question in a way, but I'm just curious how it affects your day-to-day engagement with, you know, you watch a movie like Inception or, you know, Rick and Morty or whatever. And is it like, they're getting it wrong and, you know, it's way crazier than this? Or is it like, oh yeah, that's kind of cool, the depicting part of my nightly experience? Or yeah, how do you think this is coming across in science fiction or
it's interesting because I used to think, before my experiences, I used to think that it was just, you know, complete fantasy. And as you know, Amir, I'm always a bit of a skeptic. I have quite a strong inner scientist. Even though I talk about these quite far out things, my making sense of them is often quite discerning. But so now when I look at it, I still take it with a pinch of salt, but I definitely see some reflections in some movies that's almost the same. And I'll share one. So, you know, in Stranger Things, I don't know if you've seen it, Stranger Things, very popular series on Netflix. I love the 80s, so of course I love this. So the girl can remote view, so she does remote viewing. Could be questionable to whether it's an out-of-body experience, and so can the boy. And the boy is on one level of reality and his parent is on the other. So it's the same with, I think, Flatliners do it very similar, where one person is in the, let's say, real ordinary life, and then the other person seems to be on some sort of spirit plane or dimensional plane, but it seems to be almost exactly the same as the physical one, but it's slightly different. There might be things missing, other things around, but it's operating on the same dimensional plane. And this is going to sound super cheesy, but it's the same when, you know, you see some of these movies with ghosts and the medium connects with the ghost, and then it takes you to that perspective and you can see them operating both in the same reality. So I've certainly had experiences of that, or what seemed to be that.
Awesome. So I'm just going to start with some of the questions. We'll start with the more general questions, and then I can see some of you are practicing and you've got some kind of more specific practical questions, and I'll come back to those after that. So we kind of get into the nitty-gritty of how to do that. And I'll also put in the chat quite soon. So we produced together with Jade, the Psychedelic Society, a how-to guide for beginners. So if you are a beginner and you're new to this and you want to start to practice and experience this kind of thing, then we'll put that in the chat very soon as well. So Dimitar asks, so basically lucid dreaming is like virtual reality made by our brain as opposed to the astral plane being outside of our brain, but both can feel real.
Yeah, that's a really nice way of putting it. That what I would say, because I was a lucid dreamer before I had my my big life-changing out-of-body experience, which made me change career. And the lucid dream is very real. It's this is going to seem contradictory now, but lucid dream is so real that you will question your own reality. I was teaching a friend some lucid dreaming techniques, and he finally got lucid, and he had an existential crisis because he was like, there was no difference between that reality and this reality. And I was like, I know, it's crazy, isn't it amazing? And he's like, no, it's not. It's making me question everything in my life. But I'm obviously used to it, and you get over the shock, and then you start to be able to develop skills. So it is very real, but it's very real in a different way. And this is what I mean. It feels exactly pretty much like this reality. Of course, in a lucid dream, you can float, you can fly, you can change your environment, you can manifest things into reality. And actually, in an out-of-body experience, you have less control. So my thinking around that is that you can control a lot to some degree because you're within the 360-degree virtual reality of your own mind. Whereas in an out-of-body experience, there are some sort of external forces at work. For example, I couldn't go into the park now and change the park because I was just going to say it's not part of my own mind, but then again, it depends what philosophical viewpoint. Maybe it is part of my own mind. Maybe this is my own virtual reality now. Anyway, I'm getting too philosophical again. So I couldn't change the park effectively now, whereas in a lucid dream, you can. In an out-of-body experience, you can't change. 90% of the time, you can't change your external environment, but you can move where you are in it. So you can leave, you can change in terms of, you can kind of teleport once you get quite advanced to places rather than traveling in a linear fashion from A to B. Which is what often beginners do because it's our habitual way of moving in the physical world in a linear A to B way. Whereas in an out-of-body experience, you're more, you're like what I call sometimes a floating cloud or a mass of atoms or a ghost-like apparition with different varying degrees of weight. So sometimes you can feel weighty, like it's quite heavy to move, and other times you can feel light, as though you're just a breath, and like you're a breath moving through the sky to different places. So they both feel very real, but in very different ways. And like the near-death experiences, they will generally say it feels realer than this reality, more true in some sense.
So there's a couple of questions around, you could say, jurisdiction. For example, can you astral project into someone else's dream, lucid or non-lucid? And I'll kind of piggyback on that question with someone else's question, which is obviously people who take DMT and ayahuasca sometimes feel like they're visiting other realms or other dimensions and interacting with beings from those dimensions. And so I'm curious as well, could you out of body into someone else's private conscious material, which is their lucid dream or non-lucid dream? And equally, are there any reports of like, oh, I visited this realm through DMT, and maybe someone else saying, oh, how interesting, I kind of out of bodied my way into that same realm or met the same dude, and like, isn't he nice? And he offered me a nice drink or whatever.
So the first one, can you astral project into someone else's consciousness? Again, is that where are the parameters of our consciousness? Is our consciousness confined to a specific space? This is what's tricky, and this is what's hard. But to keep it simple, you can seem to have shared experiences. So I've gone from a lucid dream and seem to have a shared lucid dream with my ex-husband. So I've had that experience, and also I've been out of body and I've perceived others who seem to be slightly out of their body but not conscious. So I'm perceiving their astral body or self almost either around but really unaware of their physical body, and sort of lying with it as well. So I haven't tried to, and I wouldn't, because there's ethics to try and go into another consciousness or affect it. But I know that in the books, and also I've had a couple of friends that have gone out. I'll tell a story of one of my friends, Luigi Scamarabella, who is the lead teacher for out-body experiences at the Monroe institute in the UK. So his friends said, oh, if you can astral project, come out of your body and come and try and get me out of mine. So he says, okay, I'll give it a go. So he came out, he had an out of body experience. He went to his friend's body and he tried to sort of pull his conscious awareness out of his body. And he was all like no, like he didn't want it. He was resisting and he thought, oh, I'm just going to leave him and go off on my journey. And then the next day they corroborated stories. He said he saw this shadowy figure come into his room, or I can't remember if it was coming to his room or he dreamt that this was happening, but he saw Luigi come in, but he was a dark shadowy mass, and he felt like he was being pulled by this shadowy mass, and so he didn't want anything to do with it and resisted. And Luigi was like, that was me, it was me coming to try and get you out. So this is what I mean about I talk about this a lot in our workshops, and this is our perception of things as they unfold. It's not always what we think. And I mentioned Todakomesis earlier, and he talks about having a shared OBE with his son. So following on from the question, he came out of his body, he saw a shadowy figure moving towards him. He just thought, I'm going to see what this is. And as it phased into view, it was his son, and then he had a shared experience. So often we can project our fears onto what we think or predict is going to be there. But if we take a mindfulness view and just accept what's in the space, see what might unfold, and then have an engagement with it, we could either tap into, oh, it's a shared experience. This might be a thought form that's manifest from my own trauma that I can integrate, have a conversation with, or maybe it could be another being or spirit or something external to ourselves. But we won't give ourselves that opportunity if we just freak the hell out every time we see something we perceive to be dark or bad or negative.
So your own subconscious or unconscious material might appear in front of you in an out-of-body experience. So it can kind of cross into that lucid dream territory where your internal experience can come out and be experienced as external from you. Am I understanding that right?
Yes, and this is and this is where it can get a bit tricky, Amir. I often talk about there are some subjective experiences, so you can come out of your body and enter dimensions and realms which seem completely interlinked with your own psyche. So, for example, say there was a trauma. Oh, I always use the example of Doctor Strange. Doctor Strange in the film, he gets an accident with his hands, and he's a brain surgeon, and his self-worth is attached to his work and his identity. He gets his hands smashed, and then later down the line he has an out-of-body experience, comes out of his body, is floating around, and he enters a place where he gets completely covered with hands. So he enters this kind of a dimension that seems to be completely reflective of his own mind, whereas he enters other realms which seem to be more physical, more real, external, the lay of the land, this world. And then you can have intersubjective experiences. And this is what I meant by it gets weird. So you can come out of your body in the physical space, and then you can have fragments or pieces of our own mind that are personified, and what we call these thought forms in front of us that seem to be external and have their own self-autonomy. I often call them a bit zombie-like. They have some life and they can make decisions, but you know there's not a lot going on between the ears or the eyes, however it may manifest. It doesn't always have to be in a human, could be an animal, but it seems to have a primalness to it, and it always seems to be coming towards you, so it seems to want to be integrated, or there's something there. And I'm talking about this particular thought form as shadow. So in the same way you can integrate aspects of your shadow in a lucid dream, you can in OBE. For those of you who aren't familiar with the shadow, we're getting into quite deep stuff here quite quickly. So I'm dropping lots of big things, I am aware. The shadow is...
And just a reminder, if we bring up something that you're unfamiliar with and you can't follow the conversation, just pop a question in the chat saying, oh, what is, shadow or OBE or whatever. Carry on, Jade.
So in a nutshell, the shadow is anything we've disowned, suppressed, or denied about ourselves, things we might not like, often related to trauma, but not always, things we pushed behind us in the shadow, everything that is behind the mask that we don't show to the world or we perceive to be negative or bad. But it's also in the shadow can be our potential, our inner light, our divinity, all the what we perceive to be good things about ourselves is also there. So when we have an OBE, these parts of our deepest unconscious mind can seem to be made manifest and want to be integrated. And there's a really nice example of this from William Buhlman, who is the lead out-of-body experience expert at the Monroe Institute in the US. And he was came out of his body, he was in a corridor, and he heard some footsteps coming up some steps, and he got a sense that he wasn't too sure what it was going to be. And when it came around the corner, it was kind of a human figure. I think it had something like a wolf's head, sloth's arms, and it was walking slowly towards him. So any normal person will be like, screw this, I'm out of here, I'm not staying in this space with whatever this monstrosity is. But because he's a teacher and he knows about these different realms of existence and dimensions and that it's not always bad, he thought, I'm going to stand here and see what this is about. And he allowed it to approach him. And as it got closer, he did get a sense that not everything was as it appeared. And it passed through him. And as it passed through him, it went and it dissolved away. And he said he felt this huge release, and he woke up and he knew it was a thought form, a part of himself that he knew had somehow integrated or released. He didn't know what part or what it was related to, but it felt positive when that happened. So we can have these kind of experiences as well. So there's intersubjective, your mind and external environment. Oh, kind of. You can have intersubjective experiences with other people's mind stuff as well, but that's getting quite multi-dimensional there.
Yeah, and what you're saying about how the same material can be perceived in a very different way, like a shadowy figure can then actually end up being just your friend trying to get you up out of bed and you're joining an out-of-body experience. It sounds very analogous to, in parts therapy, someone might go inside their psyche, as it were, feel like, there's a part of me I really don't like, and they might get an image of, an inner critic, and it looks like a horrible monster, and it's telling me off if they bring up a visualization, which is also very common in some shamanic work and psychedelic therapy, where parts of our psyche show up as images or are personified in some way. And then it becomes discovered, oh, I'm seeing that entity, as it were, through the lens or being identified with a younger version of me, like my childlike self, which saw the inner critic as a parent or a monster. And when that's put to one side, suddenly the inner critic also becomes a child. Something that was very scary is just a child trying to figure out the world and tell itself off. And so our own inner parts can show up differently based on the lens that we're looking at them through. So yeah, it's interesting that you're describing that in an interpersonal way as well, when we're discovering each other's psychic material and our own thought forms and stuff. I'm just going to try bring in a couple other questions people have put in the chat, and at least by past, if you've put in a question that's more technical and like, how do I achieve this? Then I'll save those till about past, so the last half hour, we can start to do a Q&A on troubleshooting, trying to induce these. So do you think ayahuasca or shrooms can help someone kickstart? Well, that's almost a practical question, but I'll let that go. Do you think ayahuasca or shrooms can help someone kickstart with astral projection?
Some people have reported from having various plant medicines that it's opened up something within them, that it's opened up a gift or a psychic ability, or they've released something. So I think it can have an effect on our ability to be able to astral project and do other altered state work, certainly down the line. I wouldn't advise someone to just go and do it for that reason. I kind of feel a little traditionalist a bit about it with shamanism, and that, if we feel called to do it at the right time, at the right place, for the right reasons, then I think that is good. Because if you've never done ayahuasca before and you're just going because you think it might help with astral projection, you need to be ready to go on a pretty amazing, wonderful, intense, radical journey. And you have to be open and ready for that.
Yeah. This is just a comment more than a question, but it just refers to what we were talking about earlier. Paula shares that they think that they've experienced someone projecting into their dream state. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if that's possible, but glad to hear, Jade, that you don't make a habit out of it. Someone asks, can you discover places that you've never been to an astral projection? Maybe discover places in the universe?
Yes, this is the thing. People think, oh, you have to have been there, or it has to be in your memory. No, and this is what's crazy. So when I had the experience that changed my life, one of the key points was exactly this. So I'd never been down this street before. I hadn't seen it, and I managed to get a door number. It was number 18. I purposely had that intention. And then when I came back to my body, I went and checked it out. I followed the way that I went in the real world. I went to the door. It was the same door number, number 18, which completely blew my mind because I'd never been to that place before. And I was just like, how is this possible? Which is why I took the academic route, because I wanted to learn about perception and consciousness. But you can go to places that you haven't been before, and then you can come back and verify things that you've seen or done there as well. So it is very possible to do that.
Are you familiar, again, there's a question from someone, are you familiar with the Gateway experience by the Monroe Institute, and do you think their hemisync program can be beneficial for astral projection?
Yeah, so I've done Gateway, the OBE Spectrum, and William Buellman's OBE Intensive, and they're all very good, but actually the Gateway was probably my favorite, even though the other two are more OBE focused. I had a very powerful out-of-body experience on the Gateway program. One where I believed to have met my dead father, which I was not expecting and didn't believe could be true. This is what I mean about beliefs. And so hemisync can, yes. Hemisync, for those that don't know, is a brand of binaural beat and isochronic tones. So binaural beat plays a beat in this ear, and then it plays a separate beat in this ear. And then what happens is your brain tries to recreate tries to balance it out between them. And when it does that, it puts it into certain states. So you can have binaural beat for theta, delta, alpha, gamma waves, and it supports it. It makes a conducive cushion to cushion our experiences to be able to get into an altered state. So if you struggle with deeply relaxing, you struggle with meditation, you might find binaural beats can help. There's loads of free ones on YouTube, by the way. So you can go on YouTube, type it in, get loads of free ones. But hemisync is the Monroe Institute's brand, and they have specialist ones for different things. And you can go on their website and have a look. But I would say I don't use them anymore because I find that it keeps me to my body because I'm hearing music. So it anchors me to the body. So I find it harder.
So it might be a good way if people are trying to learn how to move into these more altered states of consciousness and get used to them. Maybe it's a good kind of initial boost, but at some point, maybe you want to let that go so you can leave your body, sounds like.
Yeah, I don't think we want to become reliant on technology. This is the thing. We want to develop the skill. Same with meditation. There's numerous things to help with meditation, but at the end of the day, you want to have that shift in consciousness. You want to have that development in your skills to be able to do it. You know, if you do want to develop this practice for spiritual reasons further down the line, or even conscious dying, at the point of death, you can't go, by the way, can you put the binaural beats on? I just need to do my practice. But you won't be able to. The only thing that's going to help you in that moment is your current skill and ability. So I think in the very long run, when you get further down the line, it's good to lose the technology and just try and work with your own mind and the techniques, which is what, you know, the shamans and the monks and the nuns do when they go off into the caves, into the desert. They only have themselves, their own consciousness to rely on, which we can do the same. We all have these abilities.
Yeah, and I find it so incredible because there is all this new technology that gives people feedback, biofeedback or neurofeedback. But I have heard some very esteemed researchers say that can end up pulling people away from just sensing their own intuition about what's helping them, and suddenly it becomes a score on an app or something of like, oh, my heart rate coherence today is XYZ. And what's so interesting is that the most effective techniques that are being discovered, from what I've seen, are very synonymous, very similar to ancient techniques. So far before people had these technologies, they were just feeling like, oh, if I breathe at this rhythm, then this seems to happen. Or if I do this, then yeah. So I think it's good to just recognize that. So we'll just come into like some more practical questions. If you're completely new to this, then I'll just put that in the chat. So I'm going to do some shameless promotion for the product that we produced, which I'm also very proud of. We worked hard on it, and I think it's comprehensive and a really good beginner's guide. So that's in the chat, and that's filmed with Jade Shaw. We took 3 days. We had a lot of fun, and it goes through all the initial ways of creating the right state, which will allow an out-of-body experience, the different techniques that you can do to get out of your body, a kind of training program, and also how to, the first things that you might want to do if and when you do achieve an out-of-body experience. So I'm going to come to some questions from people. It sounds like they are now practicing. So one is, or at least lead it into that. Someone's asking, what is the link between sleep paralysis and astral projection?
Sleep paralysis, my favorite thing. I had it last week. Put your physical hand up if you have had sleep paralysis before. What? The whole top row on my screen anyway. Okay, so about maybe just under half the group. And maybe there were some hands up that I can't see as well on the names. So if you don't know, sleep paralysis is when your mind wakes up and your body is still completely asleep. And often you might have a sense of a negative presence. You might see hallucinations. You might try to scream and you can't, nothing comes out. You might try to move your body and you're locked. It's like you're paralyzed. It's pretty terrifying if you haven't had it before. However, it is the secret back door to out-of-body experiences. So if you do naturally have these awful things in a way happen, you can change it into a positive gift. And I always say you're very lucky to have sleep paralysis because you've got an extra chance to astral project other than other people who don't. So to change it into astral projection, you can try a couple of things. First, if you're panicking, you've got a sense of resistance and you're fighting the sleep paralysis, is to stop doing that and drop down into your heart space. So we could even take literally, this needs to happen very quickly. This is I call it a metta moment, a loving kindness moment. A metta is a loving kindness meditation. When you're in sleep paralysis, you don't have time to do a whole meditation because shit's hitting the fan, things are kicking off, things are coming into the room, all sorts of crap's going down. So you need to make sure that you can do something very quick. So this is a metta moment. I'm just going to see if we can have a little go at it now. So we're in sleep paralysis. We don't know what to do. Tune into your heart space. So tune into the beat of your heart. Bring your attention there. Your heart might be beating very fast or all sorts of things might be happening. But just drop your awareness into the heart and what the heart represents to you. Maybe love, maybe compassion, forgiveness, gratitude, kindness. And whilst we're here, bring any people, pets, or place to mind. People or friends that you love. Animal or places that you're fond of. Just bring them to mind. And then allow yourself to feel the feelings that you have for these people, pet, or places. Let those feelings wash over you. And in your own way, perhaps send them a smile from your heart. And then when you're ready, just opening the eyes, but being aware of how you feel now. So I thought we went in very quick and we've come out very quick because it needs to be just a few moments. And these few moments of dropping into the heart, bringing people, pet, or places to mind, and then the feelings that we feel for them to wash over us shifts us from panic and fear and resistance to the lane of love and calmness and forgiveness and tolerance. So we make that shift. When we make that shift, that often neutralizes the space. So if we're seeing anything scary, it's not getting the power from our fear and anxiety anymore, and it should just vanish. I've had this happen before my eyes. Often, as soon as I drop my attention to the heart, sometimes it vanishes, sometimes it takes a couple more moments. So we've done this, we neutralize the space. We then want to do an exit technique. And some of you here might be familiar with the rollout, but I'm going to just say an even simpler one. Just try and sit up out of the body. Have a strong intention, a strong will to sit up and out of the body and go like you're actually going to sit up. Don't move your physical body, but go like you're actually going to sit up. And then swing your legs out, or you can have the intention to float out, and then you can go and do whatever you would like. In the astral projection.
Do you think people who are actually paralyzed, not just sleep paralysis, but they're just paralyzed all the time, the neck down or whatever, do you hear about them having some kind of advantage, or it's almost easier? Well, I'm just wondering if it's, because one of the things, my understanding is when you've been teaching astral projection, is that you need to move the energy body or the light body or whatever, but not the physical body. If you're moving the physical body, then that's not it. And sleep paralysis is an advantage because you can't move however much you want to, you can't move the physical body anyway. So I'm just wondering if someone's paralyzed from an accident or for some other reason, if they have the same, I would just like to think they've got some kind of advantage there of like, okay, well, maybe you, like a blind person can maybe have better sense of spatial awareness and hearing. I'm wondering, would you think a paralyzed person would have a better aptitude for astral projection?
It could swing either way. That's a really good question, Amir. I think from the point that you're making, because they can't move their physical body anyway, they can only move their sense of movement effectively. Yes, but on the other hand, we do draw on our memory of the movement to be able to have that sense of shifting. We need to connect to a sense of active imagination in order to trigger the actual exit. So in order to draw on our memory, they would have had to have been able to move their body to some degree. It could be that some people that haven't moved their body at all have these experiences and I'm not aware of them. But I would imagine they'd need some memory of movement to be able to do the technique, unless they can draw on the visual of how other people move and apply it to themselves for the technique. But that's a good point. And if you even feel really confident and really courageous, just going back to the sleep paralysis for a second, you can not do the dropping into your heart beforehand. You can come out of your body into the space with whatever scary monster you're seeing there, and you can have an engagement with it. So I had one not last week. The sleep paralysis I had last. Oh my God, the sleep paralysis I had last week. I need to tell you about it, and then I need to tell you about the other one. But I'll keep it short. So one of my clients works with the idea of angels and connection to angels, and I've got another friend who writes books on them, and it's very fascinating. Angels have been reported from all sorts of cultures, in all different manifestations and forms, but it's not something I have a personal connection to. So I was in sleep paralysis, and I didn't do an OBE, but I knew I was in sleep paralysis. My paralysis I had with my eyes wide open. So I was in sleep paralysis, my eyes were open, and I knew I was in a deep state. And I just yelled out to the space, give me a sign, are angels real? Do angels exist? Give me a sign, are angels real? Do angels exist? And then the whole room lit up white, and my whole being and the whole room just went like this, and I was like, ah! And I snapped out of sleep paralysis because I was like, ah! This is how exciting sleep paralysis can be if we're not too scared of it. And then I'm going to tell you an opposite one now, which might be terrifying, but again, it depends on your maturity as a practitioner. So I had another one, sleep paralysis, where I had a sort of a demon looking figure that looked like a Burns victim completely. All their skin was burned, Freddy Krueger style. They came right up and they were lying next to me and their face was on mine. And I'm used to sleep paralysis. So I come out, but for some reason I drop into my old ways. So I used to fight it a lot. So I habitually went into old ways and decided to come out of my body and fight the thing, because I'm not having this, is what I was thinking. Came out of my body, turned around, started fighting this demon. What are you doing? Get off. And then I was like, oh God, no, stop fighting. I remembered to have an engagement with it and ask it. So I thought, I'm going to ask it its name. So in some shamanic traditions, once you have the name of a thought form or something external, you have power over it, right? And so I said to it, "What's your name?" And it went, "My name's Jade." And I was like, "Ah!" and came back to my body. So obviously this was how I'm making sense of this, is this was some sort of thought form of my own psyche that was wanting to be integrated. And if I look at the signs, it was a bit zombie-like. It was wanting to integrate. Didn't have a lot of self-awareness. So it was obviously a part of my own unconscious mind. I haven't figured out which part yet, but often some parts in sleep paralysis are. And some people have higher self experiences. One girl had sleep paralysis, and she said they were two of herself watching her, and one of them was trying to help her out of body, and the other one was saying that she should stay. So she had a triple perception experience of herself, seeing herself. So all sorts of things can happen in sleep paralysis.
So Lakshya asked if you can have if you can give us an alternative to the rollout technique, but I guess you did with the sit-up one, right? You can simply try and sit up without your physical body sitting up.
Yeah, you can sit up. It's a really common, really easy one that's just so simple. I often don't bother teaching it. You can just sit up, but I imagine you might want something with a bit more boost to it. So you got the rollout. You can just sit up. I can do a variant on the rope technique. You've probably read about this online. I don't really teach this in my workshops, and I know some of you are here from the workshops, so I'll do something different. You can either imagine visually or just through felt sense that there's a rope hanging from above you, and so you lift your almost astral arms or energy arms out of your body, or you imagine, at least at the beginning you are, and you try to pull yourself up the rope and pull yourself out. You only do this when you're very deep in the mind-awake body asleep state, or very deep in the hypnagogic, so on the cusp of sleep, you haven't fallen asleep yet. Now, the rope technique doesn't work for me because I can't climb up a rope. I never have been able to. I can barely lift myself off the floor. I did like this pole dance fitness class once, and she was like, "Yeah, just lift yourself up." And I was like, I couldn't lift myself up. So there's the ladder technique. So if you're like me and you've never pulled yourself up a rope, or you feel like it's too unbelievable for yourself, you can have a ladder instead. So you reach out to the ladder and you pull your sort of top half up, and then you can use the ladder to pull yourself out of the physical body. And remember, with all the visualization and the felt sense techniques, it's to really imagine you're actually doing it with will and intention, rather than just thinking a picture in your head like, now, okay, I'm picturing myself climbing up a ladder, because I can do that. I'm visualizing myself climbing up a ladder. It's not quite the same thing as imagining you're really going for it, calling on all your senses and having a picture. That's okay too. But really imagining that it's real, because what we're trying to do here is trick the brain into thinking this is the real reality. When that happens, you'll suddenly make that shift and it will become real.
And you know, obviously no one here or at Psychedelic Society, but I've heard there's people who are kind of hippies and they have a slightly floaty energy, and you could say they're ungrounded. Do you know what I mean? Kind of, maybe they do a lot of meditation, or they're up in the clouds, this kind of stereotype. But the sense I get from you still is that you're very grounded as a person. You know, you also used to be a dancer. Do you, so I'm just curious, in this, are you an exception, or do you find that people who practice a lot of out-of-body experience, it doesn't necessarily evoke this kind of, oh, I'm away with the fairies and I'm not really present? Yeah. Like, people come back to their bodies and then they're in their bodies. They get on with their lives.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's two. It depends on the time period. Long term, yes. In some of the most grounded people I know are the most proficient out-of-body experiencers. And this is because long-term practice leads to self-actualization. So in many ways, where you might have an awakening experience, insights through lucid dreaming, strong senses coming through with meditation, where you realize stuff about your life, you individuate, you become more grounded and more aware of things yourself. In fact, one of the things that people reported was more self-awareness. This is one of the traits that people had. So you more self-actualize into this reality, you more ground, and you become more of who you are. And that was the second thing, that one of the things I found in my research was you had a more individual sense of self rather than going with the flow, going with the crowd, having herd mentality. So some of the people that I know with the most experiences are very grounded. However, if you've not had many and you have one or two, and like my friend who had a lucid dream was like, whoa, oh my God, it can unground you for a short period. You can be like, is this real? Is my hand real? Is this, you can have a response a little bit like an existential crisis, which is why it's important to do embodiment and integration techniques. So you can make sense of your experience in alignment with your life, and then keep grounded and embodied. Because there's no point having these, what might seem to be far out transcendent experiences, if you can't bring the wisdom back down into the body, into this lifetime. Otherwise, it's almost a waste of time, because you need to be able to move forward in relationships, work, career, the day-to-day monotony, picking up children from school, all sorts of things. You need to be able to do that. And so it is important to embody and integrate. And
there's a couple of tips that you give in the course, link in there. And as I said, I will continue shamelessly promoting that.
The course that Amir's on about, it took us 3 days to make. I stressed out because I'm a recovering perfectionist, and bless Amir, he's calming me down. Thinking, is this the right way of saying this? Is this too much information? Am I going too far out into philosophy? So we had 3 fun days in an Airbnb shooting this course, with me going crazy and stressed out. So thank you, Amir, for being a support during that process.
No, it's good. The camera person now is an avid practitioner of
oh yeah, we converted. The filmmaker didn't know anything about astral projection, and he filmed the whole weekend. And so he got to the vibrational state. He started doing some of the techniques over the course of the weekend and managed to get to the vibrational state. I was very impressed.
Tony asks, can you heal physical illnesses in astral projection?
This is a question I don't have a lot of experience in. I've not tried to myself, but I have heard of other people doing it. So I think psychological things for sure, such as trauma, aspects about ourselves. And if you believe in, the body-mind paradigm, the body and the mind are entwined like this. So things you heal in the mind are likely to have a knock-on effect in some way to the body, and vice versa. So you can psychologically heal things. Some people have had quite extraordinary stories of healing their physical body. One of my students, called Sarah, she had what I call a spiritual awakening out of body experience. So she had a profound life gnosis about her physical illness. So I'll read you what she wrote. I have it quoted here. She said, this is after she had her OBE and she had a lot of physical illnesses. She said, in that moment, I understood every reason why I'd been struck by physical illness in the last few years. I knew that in that moment, my body is not me. Me is actually my soul. My soul is infinite and way more expansive and powerful than my body and mind. And if I began to nurture it more fully by overcoming any limitation from my mind, then I would be free to fulfill my soul's purpose. As I sat in this space, the divine downloads continued, shedding light on the most basic fundamentals of my existence. I fully understood consciousness. It's an energy shared by all living things. It unifies us all, and we all exist together in its plane. There is no separation. And she came back from that, and not as strong as Anita Morjani's near-death experience story, where her cancer completely dissolved after so many weeks, but a lot of her illnesses went after that experience. But she had, so you can have an OBE and come out of your body and go around your room, nothing really happened, and you can go back in your body. And you can come out of your body and have a numinous experience, this a divine experience of interconnectedness, oneness with everything. You can have a connection with a deity. So there are different types of OBEs that you can have, from quite mundane to profound ones like hers. I can't remember what the question was.
No, that's beautiful. If it's possible to cure a physical illness, yeah. And so her illnesses kind of cleared up somewhat.
Yeah, I think most of it is now, but so a lot of it cleared up afterwards, and then she did yoga and meditation to support with the rest of it that was left behind. So she does yoga teaching now. She used to work in banking.
Okay. So I've lost track. Oh yeah. So you know how in dreams, you might have a dream that feels like it lasts 3 hours, but then it turns out it only lasted a few seconds. Is that the same? Do you have a sense how much time, real time you've spent? Is it a distorted sense of time of like, in this plane, it's been 5 seconds, but you've had like a lifetime's worth of experiences?
Yeah, there is a sense of time. And I think this is why some people have the fear, they fear they're going to get stuck out of body. You can't get stuck out of body, because that would assume that something is completely leaving that can remain over there. So it's an aspect of our self-awareness that seems to go beyond. And anytime our body is disturbed, we hear a sound, we need to go to the toilet, we're just going to come back. In fact, most people struggle to stay out of body. But one of the reasons they might be scared is because you can feel like you've been there quite a long time, and maybe just 10 minutes has passed. It can seem quite long, and also seem quite short, and then you come back and it seems the opposite. So time can go out the window. But again, it also depends on what type of OBE. So if you have what we call a cosmic out of body experience, where you seem to go into space or visit other planets, you can, and if the physics are different to our world, there time can be all crazy. Whereas if you just come out into the physical world, or what we call the earth plane, time might seem to pass normally. So it seems like the space that you're in the out of body experience itself can determine how time is unraveling.
And is that true for size as well? Do you seem to occupy the same amount of space, or might you sometimes be microscopic and be able to, crawl through someone's body, or be huge and like be the size of a planet, or do you tend to remain, the sense remains that you are more or less the size of a human? Your perception is like human size perception.
Yeah, so both of those are a yes, but usually, again, because we are habitually sensing ourselves in our body on our day-to-day, we then take that expectation with us. So we're roughly the same size as we are now for a lot of experiences. However, you can be smaller. I've made myself as small as a borrower before. I don't know if anyone's aware of the borrowers. It's a programmed small, tiny people, like a fairy. So I've made myself very small, and I've entered a room, and I've been under the table watching a conversation, and people move around. So I've been very, very small. I haven't been really big. I've always gone small or just a bit bigger, but I've never gone huge. One of my students rolled out her body, and when she rolled out, she shrank, and she dropped down the side of her bed between the crack of the wall and the bed. So she was like 2 or 3 inches, and she dropped down the side. So you can kind of come out like gloopy gravy that's been there like, woo, woo. You can come out like this, or you can come out in more of a dissolving way, or you can come out where you literally come out arm, sit up. I've swung my energy legs out of my body and sat as though I am actually sitting in an energy body. And other times I've done what I said before, where I snaked out of my head and I came out in one long tube and then formed in the room.
Great. Sorry, I was just catching up on some of the questions. So can you have a conversation you never had with a past relative?
A conversation with a past relative?
Yeah.
So this is quite common, and a lot of people choose to visit an ancestor or someone who's passed away. And I'll tell the story of Kaz very briefly. So yes, it can happen. So her father was in a home, in a hospice, and she'd been to visit him, and he seemed quite incoherent. And so she left, and he left a voicemail on her phone, and he doesn't normally phone her. So she thought, this is really weird. Why has he phoned me? And when she picked up and listened to the voice message, he was incoherent and babbling as well. So she rang the nursing home and said, I think he needs to go to hospital because he's not himself. And they just said, well, let's see how he is in the morning. Unfortunately, he didn't make it to the morning because can't remember what was wrong, but he passed away in the night. So she had a good intuition, but she felt very guilty because what was it that he wanted to say to her? You know, they talk about a lot of people just before they die get this clarity, this awareness comes back in, and it's like they're their normal self. People with Alzheimer's or who have a lot of illnesses, and they want to say or share something. So she felt very guilty that she didn't get to see this or hear it. So she wanted to have an OBE, and she's had many in her life before, and she tried a couple of times and it didn't make it. And then I think the third time she did, and she was able to have a very ordinary exchange with him. And she said it was wonderful. She said, I've got it wrote somewhere, but I haven't got it here. But when she came back from it, she said that all the cells in her body just changed. She felt a visceral lightness. She felt it helped with her closure and helped with healing her grief when she came back from that. Now, was it really him, or was it a part of her own mind? At the end of the day, perhaps it doesn't matter because she had the healing anyway. She believes it was him. And when I met my dead father in an out-of-body experience, I believed it was him as well for the things that he said to me, which I wasn't expecting. Sometimes in the out-of-body experience, things aren't said in the way that we speak. It's almost like a telepathic intuition, communication. So you'll get a sense of a message or something from them. And it's like it's a knowing that you have. And then you have an exchange through this telepathic knowing, which is also a difference to lucid dream where you might just speak. So we had this exchange and that. So I sense I tapped into something of his essence, perhaps.
So I guess that would allow you to communicate with someone who speaks a different language or a species that doesn't even use verbal language, and it's more a communication of knowing.
From what people report in their experiences, yeah, kind of a knowing exchange. Although they can be, some people do report seeming to say stuff, but obviously there's no body. So whether they're saying it in their mind and hearing it is a different thing.
Angela, you've got your hand up. So if you want to unmute and ask a question, if that's why you have a raised hand, feel free to do that, or you can put your question in the chat. And we've probably got time just for one more. So Dimitar asked, during normal sleep, 7 to 8 hours, people go through about 5 to 6 cycles of REM. Does that mean you could have that you astral project several times a night or just once? And also, do you do it every day?
I don't do it every day. It's a skill, it's an ability. So, and generally it's a challenging one. You know, this is why they don't teach it in many traditions until you've surpassed certain other levels. Like in Tibetan Buddhism, they don't even teach you this until you have a stable mind. And that you have control over your emotions to some degree, and also that you've developed bodhicitta. So this putting others before yourself, being in service, dedicating your practice to the benefit of other beings. So sorry, I forgot so it's a skill, it's an ability. So if I'm just very doubtful of anyone that can say I can do it every single day, every night. Maybe they can, and that's my limiting belief that I need to work with. But even the best practitioners, Graham Nichols is a fantastic one. Kaz Coronel, who's a friend of mine, who I mentioned, it was her dead father's story I shared. She runs a Facebook group called Conscious Explorers. You know, she can't do it. She can almost do it at will most times, but she doesn't do it every night. Some people do believe that we have astral projection experiences when we sleep in delta, which is the deepest part of sleep, and that we just can't remember them. I don't know whether I align with that. It's not something I've experienced, but I've certainly seemed to have seen people unconscious in their astral body when I've been out and I've seen other people in their bed. So is that my perception thinking that they're there, or am I really seeing their astral body there? It's an interesting thing to think about.
Yeah. And then I'll just circle it back around to metaphysics and philosophy, just as a last question. I'm just curious if in this community of people who practice astral projection, it almost starts to become normal. I don't know if it ever feels completely normal, but it's like, you know, you've maybe done it 50, 100 times at a certain point in time. Do people tend to coalesce around the same philosophical view of the fundamental nature of reality, this kind of thing? Like, you know, is there a God, you know, when you shout, take me wherever, you know, is it a God that's controlling that? Everything is made of consciousness, a kind of idealist worldview, or is there as much variety in amongst the astral projection community, let's say, as there is in regular society?
So in a very vague general level, everybody usually believes there is more than what we can see. There is more to what's going on than meets the eye. Everyone usually believes that. What another belief is that everyone comes back, at least from my research and the studies that have been done, they all believe they are more than their physical body, which is, you know, famous quote from Robert Monroe, who studied this. If you don't know, you are more than your physical body. So everyone in some way thinks, I am more than my body. Some people believe that it's a soul or a spirit leaving. Others believe that their consciousness is expanding. Others believe that it's a part of themselves that is going, but something is going beyond. And then some people frame it in their cultural or religious belief system. So, you know, some of the spiritualists more believe in the afterlife, and they believe that, you know, everything is a part of the afterlife, where they go. Some of the shamanic traditions say you're entering the spirit world, you're going within the spirit world. I think it's good not to have a framework. I feel like a framework closes it, and just to be open. Could be the spirit world, could be the afterlife, could be something we can't even comprehend with the human brain. And that's just the best way we can make sense of it, with the myths and the stories and the cultures that we know. But keeping that openness allows for us to receive anything that's also outside of our belief system. One last thing, Robert Monroe, who studied these, believes there are belief system territories. So for you that want to take this more advanced, or you've been practicing, so he said there are realms which you resonate and you have access to on the frequency of your belief system. So, you know, if you believe in Christian heaven, you could potentially access Christian heaven or Christian hell. If you believe in the Pure Lands in Tibetan Buddhism, you can have access to the Pure Land because it's within your belief system. And he calls them belief system territories. And most people don't leave those because they're so ingrained in our psyche and our soul. So, but he says there are places and experience dimensions beyond belief system territories that you can enter into. And I think in order to access them, we have to let go of the beliefs, which is hard because we've been taught them since we were a child, and I have certain beliefs as well. So it's still trying to let those go. And I think that's a constant working process.
Yeah. I wonder if it's my fundamental belief that Facebook isn't the best way for us to organize ourselves as society, is why the Facebook Live didn't work. But just thank you, everyone, for transitioning across from the Facebook to Zoom. And I'm aware some people might not have figured that out or not have Zoom. So we'll try post at least some of this as a video in the next few days. And I really enjoyed this. So I don't know, maybe we can, again, there's the link to the course. So if you, there's a lot of very dense information in terms of how to start a practice where you can induce these for yourselves. And the link is in the chat. And then maybe we can do this in a month or so, and maybe people have some more practical questions or experiences to share. And we'll just keep the dialogue going and starting to normalize this and introduce this in Western society. It's quite an exciting prospect.
We can do it. It starts with you, everybody here. Sharing your experiences, if you feel comfortable, with trusted friends or even with complete strangers. You know, I used to not share my experiences of, even when I started teaching, they'd go, what do you do? I wouldn't say I teach out body experiences. I'd say, oh, I'm a mindfulness teacher. But guess what? I stopped doing that and moved into the resistance. When I did, they'd like open up and go, oh, my granddad had this OBE and he told me, oh, my friend had this. So it was my own limiting belief or worry of judgment that was stopping me connecting, and other people allowing others to come out of their shell and share what they'd heard or experiences they have. So you never know what might happen if you share yours.
Yeah. Great. Well, again, thank you, everyone. And hope to see you at another event or the next Q&A with Jade. And thank you, Jade.
Yes.
Yeah.
Lovely to see you all. Stay in touch and feel free to connect on social media as well.
Beautiful.
Thank you. Goodbye. See you on the other side.
Bye.
Bye. Take
Bye.
care.
Take care.
You know, Jade, I just want to say it's so beautiful to just feel your energy and the enthusiasm and the body language and the passion and the knowledge, and it's just transparent coming through, and the eyes and the teeth. It's really beautiful to just, even through this little screen, to feel you. So thank you so much for sharing everything you've shared and your time and your beauty.
Oh, thank you. Oh, that's made my day. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Amir.
Thank